Sharon Tate predicted her own tragedy weeks before it happened. Marlene Dietrich's astrologer saved her from a plane crash that ended 16 lives. And Jane Mansfield perished exactly when a satanic curse said she would. And they were just 3 of 13 Golden Age stars who risked everything to practice black magic that Hollywood tried to bury. The Church of Satan member Sammy Davis Jr. stood at the pinnacle of American entertainment in 1968. The Rat Pack's most dynamic performer commanded stages in Las Vegas, television screens across the nation, and the respect of audiences who had watched him shatter barrier after barrier in a segregated industry. His talent was undeniable. His charm was legendary. His position seemed unshakable. Then he revealed his membership in the Church of Satan. The announcement exploded across newspapers and television broadcasts. This was not speculation or gossip column fodder. Sammy Davis Jr. publicly admitted joining Anton LaVey's controversial organization, and he possessed an actual membership card to prove it. The card was numbered, official. Bearing LaVey's signature and the church's seal, Sammy carried it in his wallet. Religious leaders condemned him from pulpits. Fans who had celebrated his groundbreaking achievements suddenly questioned everything they believed about the man they had welcomed into their living rooms through their television sets. But what audiences failed to understand was why. Why would someone who had fought so relentlessly for acceptance, who had endured discrimination and overcome obstacles that would have crushed lesser talents, risk everything to join an organization that terrified mainstream America? At one ritual in LaVey's Black House in San Francisco, Sammy stood among robed figures performing ceremonies that would have ended his career instantly if cameras had been present. The room was lit only by candles, their flames casting dancing shadows across walls painted entirely black. The air was thick with incense, a mixture LaVey had blended himself, heavy with sandalwood and something else Sammy couldn't identify. LaVey himself presided, his imposing figure commanding the space as participants chanted invocations Sammy had never heard before. The words were in Latin, in Enochian, in languages that sounded ancient and forbidden. Sammy felt the weight of what he was doing, the absolute transgression of it in the eyes of the America he knew. But he also felt something else, a profound sense of permission to exist fully as himself, without apology, without the endless accommodations he had made his entire life. The philosophy resonated profoundly with a man who had spent his entire existence fighting for autonomy in an industry designed to control every aspect of performers' lives. Anton LaVey's teachings rejected guilt, embraced ambition, and celebrated the fierce independence that Sammy had needed simply to survive Hollywood's brutal machinery. The membership was brief, but absolutely genuine. He explored the philosophy with the same intensity he brought to his stage performances. LaVey later claimed that Sammy was one of his most sincere members, someone who truly understood the church's philosophy of self-determination rather than treating it as Hollywood novelty. In an interview years after Sammy's departure, LaVey stated, "Sammy Davis Jr. understood what 90% of my members never grasped, that this was about claiming the power to define yourself rather than letting others do it for you." He got it immediately. The consequences arrived swiftly and devastatingly. 3 scheduled film projects disappeared within a week of his announcement. His agent stopped returning calls. One major Las Vegas casino considered breaking his lucrative contract, a deal worth over $200,000 annually. The Sands Hotel received over 500 complaint letters in a single week, many threatening boycotts if Sammy continued to perform there. Studios that had courted him suddenly grew distant. Religious organizations that had previously honored his charitable contributions now denounced him publicly. The Southern Baptist Convention passed a resolution condemning his membership, with one prominent pastor declaring from his pulpit that Sammy had sold his soul for false promises of power. Fellow performers whispered about his judgment behind closed doors. Frank Sinatra himself allegedly advised Sammy to distance himself from the controversy, though Frank's own tolerance for rebellion had its limits when box office receipts were threatened. Sammy eventually distanced himself from the church, though he never apologized for his curiosity or his search for meaning beyond what society deemed acceptable. In interviews conducted years later, he spoke of that period as a time of genuine exploration, a moment when he refused to permit others to dictate the boundaries of his spiritual journey. For a black entertainer in 1968 America, LaVey's church offered validation of his right to exist on his own terms, to claim power in a world that had spent decades attempting to diminish him at every turn. Sammy's Church of Satan membership shocked America. But what happened in sterile medical offices with Cary Grant was even more mind-bending, and it was completely legal. The contrast reveals something fascinating about how America in the 1950s and 60s drew moral boundaries. Sammy joined an organization with Satan in its name and faced potential career destruction. Cary Grant, meanwhile, underwent consciousness-altering therapy administered by licensed physicians and was celebrated in mainstream magazines. The difference wasn't the practice itself, but how it was packaged. Medical authority provided cover that religious rebellion could not. Yet both men were seeking the same thing: transformation beyond what conventional society offered, a glimpse of realities that Hollywood's manufactured world denied existed. The LSD mystic Cary Grant never made peace with the man he saw in the mirror. Behind the sophisticated leading man who embodied elegance and charm on screen existed someone haunted by insecurities, failed marriages, and a persistent sense that something fundamental was broken inside him. The accent was manufactured. The name was invented. Even the effortless grace that audiences adored was carefully constructed performance. Then in the late 1950s, his psychiatrist introduced him to lysergic acid diethylamide therapy. Between 1958 and 1961, Cary Grant underwent over 100 therapeutic sessions involving the compound, each one a journey into what he described as mystical realms of consciousness that shattered his carefully maintained facade and rebuilt him from the foundation. Each session lasted approximately 6 hours. Grant would lie in a darkened room while physicians monitored his vital signs, and his consciousness expanded into territories he had never imagined existed. This was not recreation or rebellion. Lysergic acid diethylamide therapy was a legitimate psychiatric treatment in that era, administered by licensed physicians to patients struggling with depression, anxiety, and existential crisis. The sessions revealed something shocking. Every marriage failure, every manufactured smile, every perfect moment on camera had been a lie he told himself. In one session, Grant later recounted, he experienced complete ego dissolution, the sensation of his constructed identity as Cary Grant simply dissolving, leaving only the frightened boy from Bristol named Archibald Leach, who had invented an entirely false persona to escape poverty and pain. He wept for hours, finally confronting decades of buried trauma and carefully hidden fear. In one particularly profound session in 1959, Grant described breaking through what he called the final wall, the last defense between his performed self and his authentic core. He was several hours into the session when he suddenly began laughing and crying simultaneously, understanding with crystalline clarity that Cary Grant had never actually existed except as a protective shell. I saw myself building him, piece by piece, choosing each gesture, each inflection, each carefully modulated response, he told his psychiatrist afterward. And I saw the little boy inside who built this elaborate armor because he believed the real him was unlovable. The revelation was simultaneously devastating and liberating. For the first time in decades, Grant felt he could simply exist without performing. His Hollywood colleagues noticed the change immediately. Directors who worked with him after 1960 remarked that something fundamental had shifted in his performances. A new vulnerability, a genuine presence that hadn't been there before, even in his finest work. Some found it unsettling, this glimpse of authentic emotion from a man who had always been so perfectly controlled. Grant spoke with uncharacteristic vulnerability about ego dissolution, mystical union, and spiritual awakening. He described confronting every fear, every insecurity, every manufactured aspect of his persona, and emerging with a profound sense of connection to something larger than his individual existence. The man who had spent decades hiding behind Cary Grant finally made peace with Archibald Leach. The public reaction was extraordinary. Here was Hollywood's epitome of sophistication and control, admitting he had needed over 100 sessions to confront his inner turmoil. He became an evangelist for the therapy, discussing it openly with journalists and encouraging others to explore this path to self-understanding. Good Housekeeping magazine published his frank discussion of the treatment in 1959, shocking suburban housewives who had thought of Grant as the perfect, untroubled gentleman. His marriages to Diane Cannon and later Barbara Harris, he claimed, succeeded where previous relationships had failed because the therapy had finally allowed him to be authentic. The therapeutic compound had not simply altered his consciousness. It had fundamentally transformed his capacity for genuine connection with another human being. Grant credited these mystical experiences with saving his life and making his later years the happiest he had ever known. While others viewed his admissions as scandalous, he saw them as liberation from decades of performance and pretense. He continued advocating for the therapeutic use of the compound until it was made illegal in 1966. Grant's mystical journey had doctors' approval. But another star's involvement with Anton LaVey would end in tragedy that some believed was supernaturally ordained. The high priestess fantasy Jane Mansfield understood the mathematics of Hollywood beauty with brutal clarity. By the mid-1960s, the blonde bombshell who had once commanded magazine covers and marquee billing watched younger actresses claim the roles and attention that had been hers. Age was destroying her value in an industry that worshipped exclusively at the altar of youth. And she knew her window of relevance was rapidly closing. The decline was measurable in concrete terms that terrified Jane. In 1963, she had received 7 film offers. In 1964, 3. By 1965, she was reduced to nightclub appearances in secondary markets and European films that would never see American distribution. Her asking price had dropped from $100,000 per picture to whatever she could negotiate. She watched roles she had once been considered for go-to actresses 10 years younger. One particularly devastating rejection came when she was passed over for a part she had originated on stage. The producers wanted someone fresher, someone who didn't represent an era that was already fading into Hollywood history. Studio executives who had once taken her calls now had secretaries claim they were unavailable. Her agent suggested she might need to consider television work, which in that era represented a significant step down in prestige for movie stars. She was only 32 years old and already being written off as yesterday's news. Desperation creates vulnerability to promises of power. And Jane discovered those promises in Anton LaVey's teachings. Unlike Sammy Davis Jr.'s brief philosophical exploration, Jane's involvement with the Church of Satan consumed her final years with an intensity that worried even those who cared for her. She did not merely join. She believed LaVey when he suggested she could become a high priestess, that black magic rituals could resurrect her fading career and restore the adoration she desperately craved. Friends from that period described elaborate ceremonies, chanted invocations, and a woman increasingly convinced that supernatural forces could reverse the industry's cold rejection. LaVey photographed her participating in rituals, images that shocked the public when they eventually surfaced. In one infamous photograph, Jane reclines on an altar surrounded by candles, while LaVey performs a ceremony above her. Her expression is not one of mockery or performance. It is absolute belief. She attended ceremonies at the Black House multiple times per month, sometimes bringing her children to wait in another room while she participated in rituals. She commissioned a custom altar for her own home, spending thousands of dollars she could barely afford on candles, ceremonial objects, and occult texts that LaVey recommended. She practiced chants and invocations daily, believing that consistent effort would eventually bend reality to her will. But for Jane, these were not publicity stunts or career maneuvers. They represented her last desperate attempt to reclaim relevance and power slipping through her fingers. Then came Sam Brody, her boyfriend and lawyer, who viewed her occult practices with open contempt. He mocked her beliefs, dismissed LaVey as a fraud, and allegedly insulted the church leader directly to his face during a confrontation at the Black House. According to multiple accounts from church members present, LaVey responded with words that would later acquire terrifying significance. He warned that Brody would face consequences within a year, that those who disrespected the powers Jane was attempting to harness would pay a severe price. LaVey allegedly told Brody that he would not live to see 1968. On June 29, 1967, Jane Mansfield, Sam Brody, and their driver were traveling to New Orleans when their vehicle struck the rear of a tractor trailer shrouded in fog on a dark Louisiana highway. The impact occurred at approximately 2:30 in the morning on U.S. Highway 90. All 3 occupants in the front seat perished instantly in the violent collision. Jane was 34 years old. Her children, sleeping in the back seat, survived with minor injuries. The timing sent shockwaves through Hollywood's occult community. LaVey's alleged curse appeared to have manifested with horrifying precision. Within the predicted time frame, almost exactly 1 year after his warning, those who had witnessed Jane's final desperate months could not dismiss the eerie accuracy of the tragedy's timing, occurring within a year of the purported curse, taking the life of the man who had ridiculed the very powers she had sought to command. The deeper tragedy transcended supernatural speculation. It was the desperation of a talented woman so terrified of obscurity that she turned to magic rituals when Hollywood turned its back. Her occult practices were the frantic actions of someone drowning, grasping for any lifeline that promised to pull her back to relevance and attention. While Jane sought dark magic to revive her career, another actress believed she was born with supernatural gifts that would make Hollywood fear her. If you are finding these revelations surprising, please subscribe now. The stories only grow more shocking from here. These admissions challenge everything we believed about Golden Age Hollywood's carefully crafted images. The Witch of Belle, book and candle Kim Novak, possessed an ethereal quality that cameras loved, but that Hollywood never quite understood. Her beauty was otherworldly, her presence on screen simultaneously alluring and unsettling. When she was cast as a witch in the 1958 film Belle, book and candle opposite James Stewart, whispers began circulating on set that went far beyond typical Hollywood gossip. Kim admitted she had studied witchcraft before filming ever began, This was not method acting or character preparation. According to her own statements and later interviews, Kim's interest in mysticism and witchcraft predated her Hollywood career by years. She had studied with practitioners who taught her about energy manipulation, protection spells, and reading signs that others could not perceive. The role of Jillian Holroyd, a beautiful witch living in New York, did not require her to pretend. It allowed her to channel genuine knowledge and beliefs she had been exploring privately for years. On day 12 of filming, a heavy light fixture crashed 6 inches from Kim's head, exactly where she had told crew members to avoid standing that morning. The fixture weighed over 40 pounds. No mechanical failure could be identified. The fixture had been inspected and secured properly just hours before by experienced technicians. Cast members recalled Kim's calm reaction, as though she had expected something to happen in that precise location. She had warned 3 different crew members that morning not to stand in that specific spot because she sensed danger there. The atmosphere on set shifted immediately. What had been dismissed as eccentric claims suddenly felt uncomfortably real. Other incidents followed. Props moved between takes with no one admitting to touching them. One actress reported feeling suddenly ill whenever she stood in a specific corner of the set, a corner where Kim had mentioned sensing negative energy from a past tragedy. The actress developed severe nausea within minutes of entering that space, symptoms that vanished the moment she moved away. James Stewart himself, a consummate professional known for his grounded demeanor, later admitted the production had an unusual quality he could not quite explain. Kim also predicted minor events with unsettling accuracy. Phone calls that would come, visitors who would arrive unannounced, even the weather on specific shooting days when meteorologists had forecast differently. The accumulation of small incidents created an atmosphere of supernatural unease that persisted throughout production. Kim's admission complicated her relationship with an industry already uncertain how to handle her. Studio executives wanted to mold her into another Marilyn Monroe, a blonde bombshell they could control and market. But Kim resisted their attempts at transformation. Her mystical interests and independent spirit made her difficult to package and sell to mainstream audiences who wanted their stars wholesome and uncomplicated. The whispers about her witchcraft practice contributed to her growing isolation in Hollywood. Directors found her challenging to work with, though whether this stemmed from her mystical beliefs or her refusal to conform to studio demands remains intertwined. Kim increasingly withdrew from the industry's demands, eventually leaving Hollywood largely behind to pursue a life of privacy and continued mystical exploration. In her later years, living away from Hollywood's spotlight, Kim spoke more openly about her spiritual beliefs and practices. She never recanted her interest in witchcraft or apologized for the path she had chosen. For Kim, the mystical world represented authenticity in an industry built on manufactured illusion. Hollywood punished women who claimed any form of power beyond what studios granted them. Kim retreated from Hollywood because of whispers about witchcraft. Mae West never retreated from anything. She invited spirits into her bedroom every single morning and consulted them before signing every contract worth millions. The seance devotee, Mae West never apologized for unconventional beliefs. And by the time she openly discussed her daily seances in the 1950s and 60s, she had earned the absolute right to dismiss anyone who questioned her methods. This was, after all, the woman who revolutionized American entertainment, shattered censorship boundaries, and constructed a personal fortune on her own terms. But Mae made decisions that seemed insane to industry observers, refusing hit roles, rejecting wealthy suitors, investing in properties no one wanted. She claimed spirits guided every choice. Her rivals assumed she would destroy herself through supernatural nonsense. Then every decision paid off spectacularly. Had the spirits actually known something? In 1942, Mae's spirit guides delivered a warning during one of her morning seances. A business partner was offering a lucrative contract for a new stage production. Guaranteed money, prestigious venues, everything her advisors recommended she accept. The contract was worth $75,000, an enormous sum during wartime. But the spirits were emphatic. This partnership would bring ruin. Mae's primary spirit guide, whom she claimed was a departed spiritualist named Robert, delivered an urgent message. This man will destroy everyone he touches. Walk away. Mae refused the contract despite intense pressure from her management team, who called her foolish for rejecting such an obvious opportunity. They could not understand why she would trust invisible voices over a legitimate business deal during an uncertain wartime economy. 3 months later, that business partner was arrested for embezzlement and fraud. His entire operation collapsed, destroying everyone he had worked with financially and professionally. Lawsuits consumed careers. Reputations were shattered beyond repair. Several prominent entertainers who had signed with him lost their life savings. Mae's career remained completely untouched. She had avoided catastrophe by trusting voices no one else could hear. In 1936, the spirits warned Mae about a real estate investment opportunity that every financial advisor insisted was foolproof. A developer was selling beachfront property in Santa Monica at prices Mae could easily afford, and the projected returns seemed guaranteed. But during a seance, her guide Robert became agitated, insisting the land was cursed, that it sat on unstable ground, that Mae would lose everything if she invested. Her business manager threatened to quit over her refusal, calling her superstitious and irrational. Within 18 months, that entire development was destroyed in a mudslide that the developer had known was a risk, but had concealed from investors. Lawsuits dragged on for years. Mae, guided by spirits, had protected her fortune while others lost theirs. Before accepting any role, signing any contract, or making any major life choice, Mae consulted her spirit guides through specially arranged seances. She maintained relationships with several spiritualist mediums throughout her life, individuals she trusted implicitly to channel messages from what she believed was a higher plane of existence, offering wisdom unavailable to ordinary consciousness. Her primary medium was a woman named Reverend Jack Kelly. Yes, Jack was her actual name, who operated a spiritualist church in Los Angeles and conducted private seances for Mae sometimes twice a week. Reverend Kelly had studied spiritualism for over 30 years and came from a family of mediums stretching back 3 generations. Mae paid her a substantial monthly retainer to remain available whenever spiritual guidance was needed urgently. Another medium Mae trusted was a man known only as Professor Hargrave, who claimed to channel Egyptian priests and provided Mae with guidance on investments and contracts throughout the 1940s and 50s. The practice was never frivolous entertainment. Mae genuinely believed that entities beyond our physical world possessed knowledge that could protect her from the industry's countless traps and inevitable betrayals. Her spirit guides offered something invaluable, a source of authority that superseded studio executives, male directors, and industry gatekeepers who believed they owned her. Mae spoke with remarkable openness about these practices in interviews, particularly during her later years. She described detailed conversations with her spirit guides, explaining how they had protected her through Hollywood's most treacherous decades. She claimed they had warned her about the stock market crash of 1929 before it happened, allowing her to protect her investments. The seances continued until her final years. Even when physical frailty made elaborate rituals challenging, Mae maintained contact with her spiritualist advisors until her final days. Mae found confidence through her spirits. But another star's supernatural obsessions slowly consumed her sanity and isolated her from everyone who cared. The difference between Mae's spiritualism and what consumed Joan Crawford reveals an important distinction that 1950s America struggled to understand: the line between using mystical practices as tools for empowerment versus being controlled by them entirely. Mae maintained authority over her spiritual consultations, using them to inform decisions she ultimately made herself. What happened to Joan Crawford was something darker, a descent into obsession where supernatural fears ruled every aspect of her existence. The superstition empress, Joan Crawford's perfectionism was legendary, her discipline absolute, her need for control so complete that it defined every aspect of her existence. The public saw a powerful star who commanded respect through sheer force of will. What they could not see was the supernatural framework of rituals, superstitions, and increasingly obsessive practices that governed her every movement. Before filming Mildred Pierce, Joan spent 90 minutes arranging protective crystals around her dressing room in a specific geometric pattern she had learned from a spiritualist. The crystals, each one carefully selected for its supposed metaphysical properties, had to be placed at exact distances, aligned with compass directions, positioned according to principles Joan refused to explain to anyone. She used a measuring tape to ensure precision. If anyone moved even one crystal, a cleaning crew member reaching to dust, another actress brushing past, Joan would discover the disturbance immediately and start over from the beginning, remeasuring every distance, realigning every stone. Production was delayed for hours on multiple occasions, while Joan recreated her protective formations with obsessive precision. The cast and crew learned quickly never to enter Joan's preparation space without explicit permission. Michael Curtis, the director, finally posted a guard outside her dressing room, specifically to prevent accidental disturbances of her ritual space. The atmosphere surrounding her rituals carried an intensity that made even hardened Hollywood veterans uncomfortable. This was not casual superstition. This was someone who believed her career, her safety, and perhaps her sanity depended on executing these ceremonies exactly right. On the set of Sudden Fear in 1952, Joan's co-star Jack Palance witnessed her perform a cleansing ritual before every single take. She would close her eyes, whisper incantations he couldn't quite hear, and wave her hands in intricate patterns above her head. Palance later told friends that working with Joan felt like performing alongside someone in a trance state. She wasn't entirely present, he said. Part of her was always somewhere else, consulting forces the rest of us couldn't see. Anne Blyth, who co-starred with Joan in Mildred Pierce, recalled Joan refusing to wear a particular dress because she had consulted a numerologist who determined the number of buttons was energetically incompatible with the scene. The costume had to be completely redesigned, costing the production an entire day and thousands of dollars. Blyth found it fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Here was this powerful woman, one of Hollywood's biggest stars, completely controlled by supernatural fears most people would dismiss as nonsense. Joan believed in curses, hexes, and supernatural forces with an intensity that worried even her closest associates. Before accepting the role in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, she consulted 3 different fortune tellers and conducted a seance to ask whether working with Bette Davis would bring supernatural danger. She consulted fortune tellers and spiritualists regularly, seeking information about threats she believed surrounded her constantly. She allegedly conducted seances, attempting to contact her mother, seeking either guidance or resolution for their complicated relationship that had ended with her mother's passing years earlier. Joan collected talismans, amulets, and protective objects that she believed shielded her from harm. Her home contained altars and shrines dedicated to various spiritual purposes. One visitor counted 17 separate altars throughout her Brentwood mansion, each dedicated to different protective purposes. Friends who visited described an environment that felt more like a mystical sanctuary than a Hollywood star's residence. Every object had meaning, every placement served a supernatural purpose. Every ritual had to be completed exactly as Joan prescribed. As Joan aged and her career declined, these practices intensified rather than diminished. The superstitions that had once seemed like quirky eccentricities became consuming obsessions. She spent increasing amounts of time performing protective rituals, consulting spiritualists, and attempting to use supernatural means to maintain the control over her life and career that she felt slipping away. Her adopted children would later describe a household governed not by reasonable rules, but by Joan's superstitious beliefs and ritualistic demands. The line between healthy caution and destructive obsession had blurred beyond recognition. The woman who appeared so powerful and in command was actually terrified of aging, of obscurity, of losing the identity she had constructed through decades of ruthless discipline. Joan's rituals were driven by fear, but another icon used the stars themselves to control every aspect of her legendary life with scientific precision. Which of these revelations has surprised you most so far? And what Golden Age Hollywood topics should we explore next? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone and use your suggestions for future videos. The Astrology Addict, December 1943. Marlene Dietrich was scheduled to depart for a war zone performance, part of her dangerous but celebrated work entertaining Allied troops near combat zones. Her courage was already legendary. She risked her life regularly to bring moments of beauty and normalcy to soldiers facing unimaginable conditions. The military transport plane was ready. Official schedules were set. Marlene's participation was confirmed. Her luggage was already loaded. Then at 3 o'clock in the morning, her personal astrologer telephoned with an urgent warning. Do not board that plane. The astrologer, a woman named Carol Ryder, who would later become famous as Hollywood's premier astrological consultant, had been studying planetary transits throughout the night. Mars was moving into a catastrophic alignment with Marlene's natal chart. Saturn's position indicated mechanical failure and violence. Mercury's retrograde motion suggested communication breakdowns that would prove fatal. Every celestial indicator pointed toward disaster if Marlene traveled on the scheduled flight. The convergence of these planetary positions, Ryder insisted, created a window of approximately 18 hours when air travel would be highly dangerous for anyone with Marlene's astrological signature. Ryder had calculated and recalculated the charts 3 times, checking her ephemerides obsessively, unable to shake the conviction that Marlene would perish if she boarded that plane. The aspects were too severe, the timing too precise, the cosmic warning too clear to ignore. Military officials were furious when Marlene refused to board. They accused her of cowardice, of abandoning soldiers who needed her presence. High-ranking officers questioned her patriotism. Fellow performers questioned her commitment. The press suggested her courage had finally failed. But Marlene, despite intense pressure and public criticism, would not violate what the stars had revealed. She rescheduled for a later flight when planetary conditions improved, enduring accusations that she cared more about superstition than supporting the troops. The transport plane she was meant to board crashed in the Atlantic Ocean approximately 7 hours after takeoff. No survivors were recovered. 16 personnel aboard perished. The incident became a whispered legend among Hollywood's astrological believers, proof that cosmic forces could reveal futures hidden from ordinary perception. Marlene never publicly discussed avoiding the flight, maintaining her characteristic discretion about private matters. But those close to her knew the truth. Astrology had saved her life, while 16 others perished because they lacked access to celestial warnings. This was not casual interest in horoscopes or entertainment page predictions. Marlene employed professional astrologers who created detailed natal charts, tracked planetary transits, and provided specific guidance about timing for every major decision. She refused roles when astrological conditions were unfavorable, turning down lucrative opportunities that her charts indicated would fail. She ended romantic relationships when charts predicted incompatibility. One lover, reportedly devastated by her sudden withdrawal, could not understand her reasoning until months later, when his financial improprieties became a public scandal that would have destroyed her reputation by association. She consulted the stars before accepting contracts, planning travel, or making financial investments. One director watched in disbelief as Marlene studied star charts for 20 minutes before agreeing to a simple lunch meeting. The cosmic alignment was not favorable. The lunch never happened. 3 days later, that director was hospitalized with food poisoning from the restaurant where they would have met. Marlene studied astrology herself, learning to interpret charts and understand the complex mathematical relationships between celestial bodies that she believed governed human affairs. Her knowledge was comprehensive and technical, far beyond simple sun sign generalizations. She would consult ephemerides, tables showing planetary positions, before scheduling appointments, making telephone calls, or attending social events. Her personal library contained over 300 books on astrology, many annotated in her own hand with observations about how predictions had manifested in her life. This level of dependence revealed profound anxiety beneath Marlene's controlled, sophisticated exterior. Despite projecting absolute confidence and command, she needed cosmic validation for decisions that others made through simple judgment and instinct. The universe had to approve her choices, or she believed failure was inevitable. Even from her final days decades later, Marlene allegedly consulted star charts, seeking cosmic reassurance about what lay beyond this life. The sophisticated European intellectual who projected such rational control had surrendered completely to astrological determinism. The contrast between her public image and private reality illuminated the hidden fears that even the most powerful stars could not overcome. While Marlene consulted the stars for her path forward, another fated icon turned to psychics to engineer the comeback that would define her final act. The psychic believer Gloria Swanson knew both triumph and ruin intimately. The silent film goddess, who had commanded unprecedented salaries and wielded genuine power in Hollywood's early decades, had watched her fortune evaporate, her marriages fail, and her career seemingly end as sound films replaced silence and younger actresses claimed the spotlight. By the 1940s, Gloria appeared finished. But Gloria possessed something that separated her from others who had fallen: unwavering belief that psychic guidance could resurrect everything she had lost. Gloria did not merely consult psychics occasionally. She structured her entire comeback strategy around their predictions and advice. When conventional wisdom suggested her Hollywood career had ended permanently, her psychic advisors assured her that a triumphant return awaited if she followed their guidance precisely. The predictions required extraordinary faith. Psychics told Gloria to wait for the right project, to refuse roles that seemed appealing but would ultimately harm her, to trust that the perfect vehicle for her return would manifest when cosmic timing aligned. For years, she followed this advice, turning down offers that desperate financial circumstances made tempting, trusting that supernatural wisdom exceeded human judgment. One psychic told her in 1946 that her greatest role would come when the decade turned, a prediction so vague it could mean anything. Yet Gloria clung to it with absolute faith. She refused multiple film offers between 1946 and 1949, waiting for the cosmic timing her psychics had predicted. Then, in 1949, she received a screenplay titled Sunset Boulevard. Her psychic advisors, according to Gloria's own accounts, had predicted exactly this opportunity, a role that would showcase her unique position as a former silent film star, reflecting on Hollywood's cruel treatment of aging actresses. The psychics encouraged her to accept immediately, assuring her this represented the comeback they had foreseen. One advisor told her, "This role will make you immortal. Accept it without negotiation." Gloria's performance as Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard earned her an Academy Award nomination and restored her to public consciousness. The comeback that Hollywood insiders had declared impossible had manifested exactly as her psychics predicted, even arriving in the precise year they had indicated. Whether their guidance reflected genuine supernatural knowledge or simply encouraged Gloria to wait for inevitable opportunities that her talent deserved, the result was undeniable validation of her faith. Following Sunset Boulevard's success, Gloria became even more devoted to psychic guidance. She credited her advisors not only with career resurrection, but also with helping her navigate financial decisions and personal relationships. Every major choice required psychic approval. Every business venture needed supernatural confirmation before Gloria would commit. Gloria's story illuminates a fascinating truth about Hollywood's occult practitioners. Sometimes desperation drove them to mystical practices, but sometimes those practices actually delivered results that defied rational explanation. Gloria's comeback stands as one of Hollywood's most remarkable resurrections, predicted years in advance by voices claiming to see beyond present circumstances into inevitable futures. Gloria's psychics promised her a future, but one distinguished actor was studying the occult for entirely different reasons that society found even more threatening. The occult scholar. When John Carradine arrived for a prestigious Broadway audition, he carried a leather-bound tome on ceremonial magic under his arm. The book's cover displayed occult symbols that any educated person would recognize: pentagrams, mystical alphabets, diagrams of ritual practices that mainstream Christianity condemned as devil worship. The book was a rare first edition of Aleister Crowley's Magic in Theory and Practice, worth thousands of dollars and containing instructions for rituals most people considered profoundly dangerous. John made no attempt to hide it. The director recognized the symbols immediately. His face hardened. The atmosphere in the room shifted from professional assessment to moral judgment in seconds. "We don't employ devil worshippers," the director stated flatly, ending the audition before John had spoken a single line of dialogue. John's response was to quote Shakespeare's The Tempest, a play about magic, about Prospero wielding supernatural powers, about the Western canon celebrating mystical knowledge when presented as literature, but condemning it when studied as practice. "The cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces," John recited, his distinguished voice filling the space. "The solemn temples, the great globe itself, all are created through Prospero's magic. Yet you celebrate Shakespeare while condemning those who study what he celebrated." Then he walked out, the occult text still prominently displayed in his hands. John Carradine was among Hollywood's most respected character actors, his Shakespearean training in classical theater background commanding admiration from colleagues who recognized his artistic integrity. His voice was distinctive, his presence commanding, his reputation as a serious artist previously unquestioned. But his extensive personal library of forbidden occult texts changed everything. John did not stumble into occult knowledge casually. He pursued it with scholarly dedication that matched his approach to Shakespeare and classical literature. His collection of books on ceremonial magic, esoteric philosophy, and occult practice was comprehensive and sophisticated, representing decades of acquisition and study. He owned over 600 volumes on occult subjects, including rare medieval grimoires, original texts by Aleister Crowley, and scholarly works in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew that he had learned specifically to access occult knowledge unavailable in English translations. Some of these texts were worth more than most people earned in a year. He spoke publicly about his studies, refusing to hide intellectual interests that society deemed dangerous or inappropriate. John discussed Aleister Crowley's concept of true will, the idea that each person has a unique purpose requiring ruthless authenticity. For John, that meant refusing to hide intellectual curiosity, even when it cost him prestige and opportunity. He explained in interviews that ceremonial magic was fundamentally about understanding consciousness and will, about becoming fully oneself rather than remaining a puppet of social conditioning. He explored connections between occult philosophy and classical literature, maintaining friendships with practicing occultists who appreciated his scholarly approach to traditions that mainstream culture condemned. He corresponded with prominent occultists of his era, discussing interpretations of mystical texts and debating fine points of esoteric philosophy. The Hollywood reaction was predictable and cruel. Casting directors who had previously sought his services for prestigious projects began offering him exclusively villainous roles or characters associated with darkness and evil. Within 2 years of his occult interests becoming widely known, he received 17 consecutive offers to play Satan, demons, or evil sorcerers. One casting director told his agent bluntly, "If he wants to study devil worship, we'll give him devil roles." His occult scholarship became inseparable from his professional identity. Directors assumed that someone who studied forbidden knowledge must be sinister, dangerous, or morally compromised. Studio executives whispered that his collection of occult texts proved he was unstable, that his intellectual pursuits revealed psychological problems rather than scholarly curiosity. One prominent producer allegedly circulated a memo warning others in the industry that Carradine's interest in black magic made him unsuitable for family films or projects requiring moral authority. The memo characterized his occult studies as evidence of spiritual corruption that audiences would somehow sense on screen. John defended his studies as legitimate intellectual inquiry, no different than researching any other historical or philosophical tradition. He argued that occult texts contained valuable insights into human psychology, symbolic thinking, and cultural history that deserved serious scholarly attention. His interest was academic, motivated by curiosity about traditions that Western culture had suppressed and misunderstood. But Hollywood's imagination could not separate scholarly interest from practicing belief. The nuanced difference between studying occultism and practicing it disappeared in a culture that needed clear categories of good and evil. A distinguished classical actor became known primarily for horror films and sinister characters because he refused to hide his intellectual curiosity about forbidden subjects. John eventually embraced the typecasting, delivering memorable villainous performances, while privately maintaining his scholarly interests. His story reveals Hollywood's profound discomfort with knowledge itself. Stars could be forgiven almost any personal failing or behavioral excess, but claiming intellectual authority over traditions that society wanted to remain hidden was unforgivable. Carradine's occult studies were academic, but one rebel combined them with consciousness-altering substances and shamanism in ways that nearly destroyed him before transforming his art. The mystical rebel Dennis Hopper embodied countercultural rebellion in an era when Hollywood's old guard was losing control to a new generation that rejected traditional constraints. His success with Easy Rider in 1969 made him a symbol of artistic freedom and cultural revolution. But beneath the rebellious image existed someone searching desperately for spiritual meaning through increasingly dangerous combinations of mysticism and mind-altering substances. Dennis did not merely read about occult traditions. He attempted to practice them with the intensity and lack of caution that characterized his entire approach to life. He studied Aleister Crowley's writings on ceremonial magic with the same commitment other actors brought to method acting. He acquired original Crowley manuscripts, studied ritual techniques, and attempted to perform invocations that most occultists approached with extreme caution and years of preparation. He explored shamanic traditions from various cultures, seeking altered states of consciousness that might reveal truths unavailable to ordinary awareness. Friends found Dennis in his Taos, New Mexico compound in 1971. Convinced he was channeling Crowley's spirit directly, refusing food for days, speaking in languages no one recognized. He had covered the walls with occult symbols drawn in what appeared to be his own blood. He was emaciated, dehydrated, and experiencing what psychiatrists would later describe as a complete psychotic break. The intervention required 2 weeks of constant supervision and hospitalization. The combination of intense mystical practice with consciousness-altering compounds had pushed Dennis to psychological edges that threatened both his sanity and his career. He believed he was accessing higher realities, receiving messages from supernatural entities, breaking through limitations that confined ordinary consciousness. In his disordered state, he claimed Crowley was giving him instructions for completing a film that would reveal the true nature of reality to audiences. The notebooks he filled during this period were largely incomprehensible, mixing occult diagrams with film notes, personal revelations with mystical formulas. The period produced both artistic brilliance and personal catastrophe. Dennis directed films during these years that captured something raw and authentic about American consciousness in transition. His work possessed visionary qualities that suggested he had indeed accessed perspectives beyond conventional awareness. But the personal cost was devastating. Relationships destroyed, professional opportunities lost, reputation as someone talented but dangerously unstable. His marriage to Michelle Phillips lasted 8 days, collapsing under the weight of his mystical obsessions and erratic behavior. Years later, after achieving sobriety and psychological stability, Dennis reflected on his mystical experiments with a complicated perspective. He acknowledged that his occult practices and consciousness exploration had nearly destroyed him. But he also insisted those experiences had fundamentally shaped his artistic vision and understanding of reality. The shamanic journey had been both profoundly valuable and almost fatal. His eventual spiritual transformation took more conventional forms: meditation, therapy, artistic practice without chemical enhancement. But Dennis never completely dismissed his earlier occult experimentation. He suggested that those extreme explorations had taught him truths about consciousness and creativity that more cautious approaches could never access. In a 1994 interview, he stated, "I went to places most people never see and came back with images that continue to inform my work. The price was nearly everything, but the knowledge was real." Dennis's story illustrates the thin line between mystical insight and psychological breakdown, between shamanic vision and self-destruction. Unlike the stars who consulted astrologers or attended seances, Dennis attempted to directly experience altered states that most occult practitioners approached with extreme caution and extensive preparation. His survival and eventual artistic flowering suggested either remarkable resilience or evidence that his mystical experiences had contained genuine value worth the extraordinary risk. Hopper's occult experiments nearly consumed him, but for one beauty, belief in curses became a self-fulfilling prophecy that destroyed everything she had built. The contrast between Dennis's deliberate pursuit of dangerous mystical states and what happened to Veronica Lake reveals another aspect of Hollywood's relationship with the occult in this era. Dennis chose his path consciously, embracing risk as part of artistic exploration. Veronica Lake, by contrast, became a victim of belief itself, not because she practiced magic, but because she convinced herself that others had practiced it against her. The belief in external supernatural persecution proved just as destructive as any actual curse could have been. The cursed beauty Veronica Lake's iconic peekaboo hairstyle defined 1940s glamour. Her film noir performances captivated audiences, and her beauty seemed eternal and untouchable. Then came the decline so rapid and complete that Veronica herself could only explain it as a supernatural curse, a hex placed upon her by forces she could not identify or escape. The fall from stardom was objectively brutal. By the late 1940s, Veronica's career had collapsed with shocking speed. Studios that had once competed for her services stopped calling. Directors who had praised her talent now found reasons to cast others. Within 2 years, she went from earning over $3,000 per week to struggling to find any work at all. The industry that had worshipped her beauty discarded her with cruel efficiency. But Veronica believed something darker than changing Hollywood tastes was destroying her. She told friends about a specific incident that convinced her she was cursed. During a confrontation with a powerful studio executive who had made unwanted advances, Veronica had slapped him and walked out. He had shouted after her, "You will never work in this town again, and your beauty will turn to ashes." Within months, her career began its catastrophic decline. She became convinced that this executive had paid someone to curse her, that black magic had been invoked to ensure her destruction. She consulted spiritualists and psychics desperately, seeking confirmation of what she increasingly believed, that she was cursed, that supernatural forces were systematically destroying everything she touched. The more her career declined, the more convinced Veronica became that hexes rather than ordinary Hollywood cruelty explained her situation. This belief shaped every subsequent decision, creating a downward spiral that became tragically self-fulfilling. Friends from that period recalled a woman consumed by supernatural paranoia. Veronica believed competitors had cursed her beauty, that former lovers had hexed her talent, that industry enemies had employed black magic to ensure her complete destruction. She spent diminishing resources on spiritualists who claimed they could break the curses, on protective talismans that promised to shield her from further harm, on elaborate rituals designed to reverse supernatural damage. One spiritualist charged her $5,000, money she could not afford, for a ritual that supposedly would break the curse. It did nothing. The tragic irony was that Veronica's belief in curses manifested exactly the destruction she feared. Her obsession with supernatural persecution made her impossible to work with, difficult to help, and increasingly isolated from anyone who might have supported her through difficult times. Directors who might have given her opportunities heard about her curse obsession and decided she was too unstable to employ. The curse was not external. It was the belief itself, consuming her from within and ensuring that every fear manifested into reality. By the 1960s, Veronica Lake, once among Hollywood's most glamorous and highest-paid actresses, was working as a bartender at the Martha Washington Hotel in New York, living in obscurity and poverty, earning $1.25 per hour plus tips. She passed away in 1973 at age 50, largely forgotten by an industry that had once celebrated her beauty and talent. What destroyed Veronica was the belief that she was cursed, that forces beyond her control had doomed her to failure and obscurity. That belief became the curse itself, more powerful than any hex an enemy might have cast, more devastating than any spell a competitor might have employed. Veronica believed she was cursed, and that belief manifested a curse more complete than any occult practitioner could have designed. If you have enjoyed uncovering these hidden truths about Hollywood's golden age, please like this video and share it with fellow lovers of classic film. These stories deserve to be remembered and understood with compassion and complexity. Veronica believed curses destroyed her, but one young star's premonitions warned of a horror that would shock the world and forever change how we understand the fragile boundary between Hollywood glamour and darkness. The tragic premonition. Sharon Tate embodied everything beautiful and innocent about Hollywood in the 1960s. Her beauty was luminous, her spirit gentle, her future limitless. married to director Roman Polanski, pregnant with their first child, ascending toward stardom. Sharon seemed blessed by every advantage that fortune could provide. But Sharon claimed to receive premonitions, dark visions of approaching tragedy that no one took seriously until it was horrifyingly too late. Sharon told her close friend Joanna Pettit about a recurring nightmare that had plagued her for months. In the dream, she saw herself and several friends attacked by intruders in a house filled with candles. The dream always ended the same way, with Sharon trying to protect her unborn child while pleading for mercy. She described the dream with such specific detail that Pettit became genuinely disturbed. Sharon said she could see faces in the dream, not clearly enough to identify, but enough to know. They were young, wild-eyed, filled with a kind of rage that seemed disconnected from any rational motive. She described the smell of incense mixed with something metallic. She described hearing music playing somewhere in the background, peaceful music that contrasted horribly with the violence unfolding. The dream was always in the Cielo Drive house, always at night, always with candles burning. She had the dream at least a dozen times between March and July of 1969. Each time waking up in tears, each time describing it in greater detail to friends who grew increasingly concerned, but didn't know how to help beyond offering comfort. According to multiple accounts, Sharon consulted psychics who warned her of approaching danger involving strangers and violence. One psychic allegedly told her in early 1969 to avoid large gatherings and to be cautious about who she allowed into her home. The warning was specific enough to concern Sharon, but vague enough that precise protective action seemed impossible. Another psychic, a woman Sharon visited in Beverly Hills in June 1969, reportedly became visibly disturbed during their session, telling Sharon that she saw darkness coming from multiple directions and that Sharon was surrounded by threatening energy that the psychic couldn't fully interpret. The woman allegedly refused to accept payment for the session and urged Sharon to consider leaving Los Angeles for several months. Sharon expressed confusion about how to act on such vague warnings. She couldn't simply flee her home and her life based on nebulous predictions that might mean nothing. Sharon expressed fears about her safety in the months before August 9, 1969. Her husband Roman was in Europe working on a film. Sharon was 8 months pregnant, staying at a rented house on Cielo Drive with friends for company and protection. She had mentioned to multiple people, her sister Deborah, her friend Jay, Sebring, and others, that she felt uneasy in the house, that something about it felt wrong, but she couldn't articulate why. Roman had encouraged her to have people stay with her, recognizing her anxiety even if he couldn't fully understand its source. That night, Charles Manson's followers invaded the home Sharon was renting in Los Angeles. Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant with her son Paul, and 4 friends, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, and Stephen Parent, lost their lives in violence so senseless it ended an era of American innocence. Sharon was 26 years old. Her unborn son never had the chance to take his first breath. The tragedy sent shockwaves beyond typical Hollywood mourning. Sharon's earlier premonitions acquired terrible new significance. The recurring dream she had described to Joanna Pettit matched the crime scene with eerie accuracy. Multiple attackers, desperate attempts to protect her unborn child, pleas for mercy that went unheeded. Friends who had heard Sharon describe her fears and nightmares were haunted by the realization that she had somehow known what was coming, but couldn't prevent it. Joanna Pettit reportedly suffered psychological trauma from having listened to Sharon describe what amounted to prophecies of her own fate, feeling helpless guilt that she hadn't taken the warnings more seriously or found some way to intervene. The psychics Sharon had consulted went silent, some reportedly leaving their practices entirely, disturbed by their inability to provide warnings specific enough to save her. Charles Manson himself claimed connections to occult philosophies, twisting fragments of various mystical traditions into his deranged worldview. A young woman who practiced forms of mysticism lost her life to someone who perverted occult traditions into justification for unfathomable violence. The tragedy created lasting fear within Hollywood's spiritual community. Stars who had previously discussed their occult interests openly became suddenly silent. Seances and mystical gatherings that had been relatively common in certain Hollywood circles largely ceased. The association between occult practice and the Manson incidents, however unfair and irrational, cast a shadow over supernatural exploration that lingered for decades. Some believed that Sharon's premonitions had opened doorways that should have remained closed, though this interpretation cruelly blamed the victim for violence perpetrated by others. Sharon's story is told here not to sensationalize tragedy, but to honor her memory with the complexity she deserves. She was a woman who sought spiritual meaning, who trusted her intuitions, who tried to understand forces beyond ordinary consciousness. That her premonitions proved accurate makes her story more heartbreaking. That no one could interpret her warnings clearly enough to prevent disaster illustrates how difficult true prophecy is to recognize until hindsight makes everything clear. These 13 stars shared one fundamental quality. They refused to accept that material reality exhausted human experience, whether through seances, astrology, Church of Satan membership, consciousness-altering therapy, witchcraft practice, or premonitory dreams. Each sought connection to something beyond Hollywood's manufactured glamour and controlled images. Their occult practices were survival strategies, methods of maintaining sanity and autonomy when everything conspired to strip both away. In an industry where studio executives controlled every aspect of performers' lives, dictating what they wore, whom they dated, what names they used, what they said in interviews, these mystical practices represented one realm where stars could claim authority, independent of corporate control. Mae West's spirit guides told her things her business managers couldn't. Marlene Dietrich's astrologers provided certainty in an uncertain world. Sammy Davis Jr. found validation of his right to exist on his own terms. Even when these practices became destructive obsessions, as with Joan Crawford, they represented desperate attempts to maintain control in lives defined by others' demands. We live now in an era where mysticism and supernatural beliefs have been somewhat normalized, where astrology apps proliferate on smartphones and spiritual practices are marketed as wellness. But these stars practiced their beliefs when admission could mean complete career destruction, when occult interests marked them as dangerous or unstable in the public eye, when simply owning certain books or consulting certain advisors could end decades of carefully built success. The courage that required cannot be overstated. They risked everything to trust that invisible realities mattered as much as visible performance, that there were truths Hollywood's machinery could not manufacture or control. We remember them now, not only as stars who admitted supernatural beliefs, but as human beings who sought meaning beyond material success, who trusted that invisible realities mattered as much as visible performance. They were pioneers of a sort, not because their specific practices were always healthy or wise, but because they insisted on spiritual autonomy at a time when every other aspect of their lives was subject to corporate control and public judgment. Some found empowerment through their practices. Others found only deeper isolation and fear, but all of them demonstrated that even at the pinnacle of fame and success, human beings need to believe in something beyond the immediate material world, and need to feel connected to forces larger than their individual existence. If these stories have moved you, please subscribe to our channel. We are dedicated to revealing the authentic humanity behind Golden Age Hollywood's carefully constructed images. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Hollywood's hidden spiritual history. Until next time, may you remember, these stars not for scandal, but for courage. The courage to seek truth beyond what others deemed acceptable. The courage to risk everything for beliefs they held sacred. The courage to admit that even in the spotlight's brightest glare, they remained human beings, searching for meaning in a world that too often reduced them to nothing more than beautiful images on a screen.